Welcome to the Firebelly Social Show. We're focused on talking to food and beverage brands that are on a mission to make the world better.
Hey, everyone. Duncan here with another episode of the Firebelly Social Show, where I chat with founders and leaders of mission-driven food and beverage brands. And I'm so excited because today we're stepping into the world of my man, Daniel Clarke. He's a debonair beverage man and a self-described international man of mystery. So super exciting. And we've worked together on some things before and we're friends.
Yeah.
So super cool. But before we dive in, a huge thank you to our sponsor, Firebelly Marketing. We help mission-driven food and beverage brands build community, build stories, create meaningful engagement, and turn social into a growth engine. So if you're ready to elevate your brand online, on social, head to firebellymarketing.com. So today's guest, man, I tell you what, he really gets both the boardroom and the bottle. And he's a marketing consultant and a fractional CMO, and that's how we've become buddies. He's held senior brand leadership roles at Pernod Ricard, Filmland Spirits, helped incubate and scale spirit brands, led global innovation at Coty on Calvin Klein fragrances, and started his career in strategy consulting at Booz Company and brand management at Procter Gamble. In other words, he's been there, he's done it on how big brands are built, and now he's applying that playbook to brands large and small, including the entrepreneurial ones. And Daniel he brings a unique blend of corporate discipline with creative audacity. He understands positioning, innovation, the P&L, and performance, but he also believes brands should have personality, narrative, and cultural relevance. So Daniel, my man, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on here. I'm so glad we could get to do this.
I know. I'm so between your travels and my travels, it's been hit or miss. So I'm so happy we're doing it finally. Yeah. Now, Daniel, you have been introduced as an international man of mystery. How does leaning into that character help shape brand perception? And just tell us more about yourself.
Sure. I don't know about the mystery part, but certainly the international part is true. I've actually had the privilege to live and work in 7 countries. I was born in Hong Kong. And in fact, the pictures behind me tell a bit the story, because I actually grew up in Nottingham, and there's a picture of our local stately home in Nottingham. I went to college in Edinburgh, which is a wonderful city, obviously the capital of Scotland and the home of, whiskey, certainly from a European point of view. I also spent a year in Canada at Queen's University. And then I really started on my career, firstly in Hong Kong, which you can see there. And then I was, as you said, with Procter Gamble in Geneva. That's the fountain, the jet d'eau, as they call it there. And then I moved to Dubai for 5 years, which was incredibly exciting to see the real birthplace of a city. And then in 2012, I moved to the States, starting with 10 years in New York. There's obviously the picture of the Brooklyn Bridge. But now I talk to you from Denver, Colorado. I love being in the mountain region. Yeah, it's a really great way to live with all the outdoors, but a lot of exciting things happening in Denver. And I will say, 18 months ago, I also became an American citizen. So that makes me very proud to be here in America.
Oh, yay. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing.
I'm keeping my accent, though, if that's allowed. So
that's preferred. Anytime you're in a piece of content that goes crazy, your personality and your accent and everything, your style, bringing it all together. So yeah, please do not lose that. Now, Daniel, along the way, you became a marketing consultant and your fractional CMO, and you started your own company. Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, after kind of many years in the corporate world, I thought I would try my hand at, something different and get into the business of marketing consulting. I called my consulting tea at 4. So I'm so British. I don't really drink coffee, more because I don't like the taste of coffee. Trust me, I love the caffeine. But I'm very British and drink tea. And traditionally, tea is taken at 4 o'clock. And I just really think that, it's a moment in the day to maybe take a break, step back, and can contemplate the bigger picture about what's going on. I mean, in the course of our business days, we get so dragged into all the details. And I think it's really important to take back and think about the bigger picture and the strategy. And that's what I try to bring, to my clients and my work. But that's a bit behind the name of the consultancy.
I mean, look, I mean, I'm a guy from a former colony too, so I mean, tea time
Exactly.
is very important, and every time I'm in India, like tea time is one of my favorite times. They have very different types of biscuits and a little tea
Are
time.
you a chai person
I
or?
used to be, but now I just prefer a light black tea. So.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. I think chai's a bit heavy for me, occasionally, very occasionally.
Yes, yes, and I love the little tarts and the cucumber sandwiches. And when I have tea at my mother's house, there's always like some fried salty things that I have to avoid reluctantly. But I think what I'm reading into it is that there's also a ritual, right? It's so cool to have something that you're going to do every day at a certain time. Tea at 4.
There is a ritual behind it. And if you think about industries like the hospitality industry, it's full of rituals, actually, whether that's the drinks or, what hotels do, the little signatures. And this can really help build and shape a brand. And by the way, it doesn't have to be, really involved or really expensive. If you think about a brand like DoubleTree, I mean, what do we expect when we check into a DoubleTree? It's a warm cookie. And that's their thing. That's their ritual. That's their welcome ritual. And it's become synonymous with their brand. So I think rituals are a great thing and can be applied in very, very many ways to many industries if you get a little creative about it.
Absolutely. And I think they bring texture and structure and so much richness to everything. So you've Daniel, you've been there and you've done it. So this next couple of questions are based on your rich, work experience. And I wanted to ask you, what do big CPG brands get right? And I guess conversely, what do they get wrong?
Look, I think what big CPG brands do really, really well is they really take the time to understand the consumer and the consumer needs, and they go very deep on the research and the data. Um, when I started out with Procter and Gamble, I mean, the standard of kind of research and ethics going on there to create incredible brands, billion-dollar brands, and they're really, really good at it. And I think the second thing they're really good at is building long-term relationships with consumers. They're not in it for the quick here and now. If you become a Tide consumer, chances are you're going to use Tide the rest of your life, and they're really good at that. The downside to that is that it takes time. It takes time to do that research and then translate that into a really sound brand and product proposition. It takes time to build a long-term relationship. On big brands, it takes time and money to, do big, glossy, traditional advertising. We've obviously just, had our Super Bowl advertising, commercial season, and there was some really, really brilliant, but frankly, very expensive and probably time-consuming commercials to make. And that obviously makes them vulnerable to, all these challenger brands, which is, typically start out life as the smaller brands. I think what they do, and it's probably very obvious to you and your audience, I mean, they have speed normally. That's it. And they pinpoint a specific problem to solve or gap in the market or a weakness in the category, and they exploit it very precisely and very quickly normally, and then really ramp that up quite quickly. I think smaller brands take much more risks when it comes to, for example, content and engaging consumers, and they can really jump on cultural trends in a way that the larger brands, I mean, they have to just be a little more cautious. They've got shareholders, they've got the stock market, they've got industry watchdogs looking at them all the time. Smaller brands, maybe fly under the radar screen a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely as you said in the pre-show, like yin and yang, right? It's like what one has what the other one wants in many ways, and like someone like Mondelez, for example, they have to
Right.
rely on acquisition as opposed to innovation at the speed that a smaller brand can do it.
Absolutely. But then you look at, some of these high profile acquisitions now, and those smaller brands, and the reason why they are attractive to the larger companies from an M&A point of view is because if they've been founded in a really solid way, in other words, who's the target and what's the need or the problem we're trying to solve? Does our product fit that? From a functional point of view and an emotional brand point of view. If those fundamentals are in place, then you have the recipe in theory to scale. And that's why they can successfully transition into a kind of corporate portfolio.
Yeah.
I think where some brands struggle is that if those fundamentals aren't quite there for a larger corporate, they're like, well, what do we have to go back and redo those? And then therefore, what's the real value we're actually purchasing here?
Yeah. I mean, the Olipop type acquisitions do not happen every day, and that's for a reason.
No. And I'll be off to Expo West next month. And I mean, there's just so many of these, particularly these better for you kind of soda or drinks brands. And you have to ask, why is it, Olipop kind of got picked up, and what is it about their proposition? And you could point to so many different things in that example. The product, obviously excellent. The packaging, disruptive, standout, communicative. This makes the brand salient and very valuable from an M&A point of view.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, and I think I don't want to limit my question here, but I mean, so many categories today are so incredibly overcrowded, right? And so even if you have a great proposition, getting on anyone's radar can be difficult. Well, in your rich experience, how do brands stand out today?
I think it might seem like a really obvious answer, but you need a very clear point of difference. You need just at least one thing that is really, really different. I've spent the last 10 years of my career working in and around the alcoholic beverages industry, particularly spirits, right? And I mean, I don't know what the stats are now. I mean, we used to say about 1,000 brands launch every year, and maybe only kind of 20 or 30 of them will survive. Because you walk into your average liquor store, or if you're in a state like, Texas or California, you go into one of those huge Bevmos or Total Wine and More, there's literally thousands of brands there. And so you've got to, in a category that's so hyper fragmented, you've got to have a point of difference. And that's what excites me when I work with certain brands, if you can really get that point of difference. So, for example, the brand that I'm the fractional CMO on, or the VP of marketing, Filmland Spirits, it's just a really different kind of brand starting point. It's all about the world of film and combining film and whiskeys. It's got a very clear point of difference from the packaging in terms of this movie poster, for a whiskey. It's not for everyone, and that's okay, because you kind of know you have a clear point of difference if you then have a product or proposition which is a little bit polarizing, meaning it really appeals to some people, and for other people it's not for them. At least it has a point of view, and it's that point of view and that point of difference that can help you stand out from the crowd.
In fact, I'd love to explore that a little bit. I mean, we've both worked on Filmland, and I've heard people, like for real people in person, say, "Wow, that's a beautiful bottle," and then they'll laugh. Well, let me guess, the liquid's not very good. And I'm like, "No, you taste it," and then they taste it, and they're like, "What? Can this be real?" Because I think people think that kick-ass brand and kick-ass liquid in bourbon can't go together.
Can't go together. Exactly. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because in a way that was our founders kind of early philosophy. Why shouldn't they be able to go together? In other words, why can't you have a great liquid, which maybe is more associated with a more traditional brand, or dare I say, a little staid, a little boring? Why should it be that way? Why can't we have a really fun out there brand, but an amazing product? I think anyone watching this who works in and around food and beverage know that the table stakes is to have an amazing product. Because it doesn't matter how novel your concept or packaging is, if at the kind of second moment of truth, people try it and it's not great, they're never coming back. And there's many different ways, to validate that quality product. In the spirits industry, we talk a lot about having medals, but of course, in an influencer or creator economy, I mean, all those reviews and those clubs, and it does, in food, people are often going off recommendations. So there's a way to bring credibility to the product. And then the other half of the equation is to have a really resonant brand, something that stands out, which is different. The challenge is communicating all of that, in the few precious seconds you have to grab the consumer's attention.
Absolutely.
And sometimes, we have to make a choice. Are we going to make a piece of content which is really leading with the brand first and hope we draw them in and then very quickly tell them how good the product is? I mean, using external validation, right? Or sometimes it's absolutely appropriate to do it the other way. It's to say, hey, we're leading with the product. Maybe it's a group of whiskey enthusiasts, right? You're not going to pull the wool over their eyes on the product. So you might lead with, hey, we are a portfolio of gold and double gold winning whiskeys and ryes. And by the way, this is our brand. And it's like something you've never seen before. So I think it's understanding your audience and tailoring that content to give them the hook that's most important to them first.
And I think the cool opportunity, which most brands can't rise to, is building a world around the brand, right? So in the case of Filmland, there's scripts behind these. Every SKU has a script, and there's characters, and there's posters, and there's the filmologist, and there's all this sort of like extensive layers around the brand. So when you're in the brand, you're really in it.
Absolutely. And I think that's the great thing about, an example like Filmland is it has a lot of different angles from which you can approach content, right? Because it's this quite unique concept, and it's, it could be about film, it could be about, as you say, characterization, the genre of film. The challenge for some of the other whiskey brands is they are coming with, I'm sure, a great product, but it's, one of these stories about a location or a distillery or 3 generations of whiskey makers or whatever else it is. And, once you've talked about that a little bit, well, where do you go? What is your inspiration for content after that? Because that's good enough to give you the foundations of the brand story. But in a sense, you can only tell that to a consumer once. But what comes next? And I think that's where brands can sometimes really struggle. What is the guiding light of engaging content beyond the kind of founding story, which after a while, consumers are like, well, yes, I've heard that. What now?
Yeah.
And we've had lots of chats about, where that content should go. What's interesting is in the discussions we've had about Filmland, it's more about which one to pick. It's not necessarily been a question of we have nothing in the vault, we have to create something from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's it. That's interesting. When I think of bourbon, for example, or tequila or mezcal, right? It's like there's kind of a stereotype, mezcal is going to have like the little symbols, or tequila, and it's kind of ethnic looking. And, bourbon's going to like be old school looking labels, and they're going to granddad that did this and that, and they've been in the same distillery for 180 years, and it's kind of boring, as you said. And like sometimes when I'm looking at the labels, I'm like, then I see a black bottle, which looks completely out of place on the shelf, and I'm going to go to that bottle and pick it up. Now, I'm still may not buy it, but I'm going to pick it up, right? And then the story on the bottle.
Totally. I mean, you mentioned mezcal. I used to collaborate with Del Maguey, which is one of the Pernod brands. And I very much say collaborate because there was a team who were connected right to the founder. And I mean, they were really the experts, and we were just helping them bring that brand into the Pernod portfolio. And through that, I learned a lot. And you think about a brand like Del Maguey, and I'd encourage your listeners or viewers to go to take a look, to Google it. And it's the mezcal in the kind of green wine bottles. And what's really interesting is it has a beautiful liquid story. And of course, the liquid is excellent as well. But it has two other kind of points of difference. Each of the liquids is based on a single village in the Oaxaca region where mezcal is created. And secondly, there's a whole art angle to this brand. So the labels, often original kind of artwork, there's very unique bottles. So, already this brand is better set up for success than a mezcal brand that's just going to talk about its kind of origin story. Because now you have an opportunity to do storytelling around each village, and how it represents each expression. You have an opportunity to bring the world of art, which is, limitless, right, really, into this brand world in a credible way. And so I think, if there are people out there who are looking to establish a brand or a new product in any category, I would always encourage, start with the product first. I mean, you've got to understand a consumer need or be solving a problem, and make sure the quality of the product or indeed service that you're offering is top notch. But then really spend some time imagining the brand world, at the beginning, and make sure there's enough, space in that brand world to kind of create enough engaging content as is needed with every brand today. Because if you don't have enough space, you'll run out of runway very quickly. It's going to become very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me ask you this. This just occurred to me because I love music, and you don't see a lot of brands using music as part of their world. Do you think there's a place for music in a world around a brand?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what I'd say is that there are actually brand categories that are more prone to using music. And of course, a couple that I've come from. So alcoholic beverages, very clear. In fact, beverages in general. I mean, look at the way Pepsi, embraced music, right? But also fragrances, and probably a bit more linked to the celebrity kind of factor there. But I think, music is a universal unifier, as it were. We can all kind of come together over music, or at least the majority can. But music itself is a series of brands. I mean, each artist is their own brand, and there's the kind of their equivalent of the product is the genre of music and the type of music they put out. And to my point earlier, it has to be good, because if they're just not a great musician, they're not going to get much traction. But then the other side of them as a brand is their entire persona, everything from what they wear and how they communicate on social media to the kind of causes they support and the events they turn up to. So I think not only is are musicians a brand in themselves, when then you link up the right musician brand with the right product brand, you can get some real kind of magic to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I collaborated with a brand called Millie's. It's a sipping broth, so it's kind of like a tea bag, but you dip the tea bag in, and it's basically like different flavored broths. And it's interesting because we wanted to keep it simple, And so we did a playlist on YouTube and a playlist on Spotify. And then based on the flavors, we were integrating. And I know Berea, I think it was Berea that did, depending on which type of pasta you were cooking, they had
Right.
playlists that lasted as long as it took to make the pasta. So interesting things. I love what you said. It's a universal unifier.
Yes, or at least it should be. I mean, of course, it ignites debate. We've just seen that during, the Super Bowl. But at a minimum, it starts a conversation, and that's what all brands and entities want now is a conversation about what they are.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, I think I wanted to get your thoughts on identity and experience, versus
Mm.
kind of like the, I don't want to say mundane, but maybe day-to-day marketing execution, right? Very, very different things to think about, and what your thoughts about, the one versus the other.
Sure. Look, I'm a bit of a traditionalist in that I think there's a great value in establishing those fundamentals. And even if that's a paper exercise, really writing down what is your brand positioning. If you're a purpose or have a mission, is it clearly articulated? What's the personality of the brand? What's the character of the brand? I think it's so important to have those because ultimately that becomes the guiding light for, as you would say, the day-to-day marketing. And what is day-to-day marketing these days? For the majority of brands, it's content and indeed experiences. But they shouldn't be so random. They should be guided by bringing that identity to life with a relatively strong degree of consistency, which is why I always argue you need that base foundation. Okay. So I think both are important. And I mean, we can't obviously do this podcast without talking about AI, which is such an enabler. I mean, I would argue that AI is not replacing the brand fundamentals. What it does is it massively changes, in most cases for the better, the process of getting to the fundamentals or bringing them to life, right? We all know AI is as good as the prompts you give it. So if you're asking it to make a piece of content for your brand, you better give it some instructions about, well, are we a modern brand, a traditional brand? Are we family? Are we edgy? Are we this? Are we that? What are the colors we use? If that isn't defined, you'll be prompting forever and frustrated with the result. If that is well defined, now with AI, I mean, back in the day, we would brief that into an agency and, 2 weeks later, hope that a few visuals come back or whatever. Now, of course, you type it in and, 100 visuals can come back in a few minutes. But if you want them to be right, if you want them to be relevant for your brand, you better have the right prompt, which starts with the right fundamentals.
Yeah.
I'm actually planning on doing a kind of brand positioning bootcamp in the next couple of weeks, where I'm going to talk people through what I believe are those fundamentals to map out that will enable efficient prompting of AI to help you actually then go on to create the brand name, the logo, the kind of color scheme and the brand guidelines. Because I think a lot of people and entities are just kind of putting everything into AI and expecting it to spit out, quote unquote, the answer. Whereas if I still believe it is your responsibility to figure out the kind of brand you envision that you want, especially if it's reflecting you as a founder. And once you have that, the process of using AI to bring each element to life should be far more efficient and far less frustrating.
Absolutely. I mean, I was just reading about the Socratic foundation or the Socratic approach to prompts, whereas opposed to just giving it a set of instructions that's combined with many, many questions about what you anticipate your output will be. And it's interesting to see how that works. So basically asking it many, many questions along with the briefing that you're giving it. So
yeah, absolutely. And then, really capturing that so that that is your baseline every time. And of course, there's ways to kind of feed that into those AI systems so that you don't have to keep repeating yourself, but making sure that whatever the kind of hardwired programming is to that project or that brand is really solid. And that's what you want it to represent.
So, what are you really excited about? I mean, you mentioned the boot camp. That's clearly something you're excited about. What things are you excited about these days in the world of branding?
I think I'm continually excited and daunted by AI. I mean, I think I'd be, you're not being very on. I'd be less than honest if I wasn't, didn't express that sentiment that it's very much a torn emotion. And for someone like myself, I could look at AI and think, oh, it's about to eat my lunch, it's about to do my job for me. Or you can think, okay, no, it's a really, really powerful tool. How do I, and in turn, hopefully help my clients adapt to a world where that becomes the engine, or even, but you still need a driver, right? I think I'm excited by the speed at which new brands can come to fruition, and the speed at which existing brands can evolve. I think that's very exciting. And I also am very excited at the way brands, I think, are getting more involved in culture, and bringing their point of view. Obviously, I think we're in a bit of a precarious time. I mean, I think we're in a bit of a turbulent time. Maybe that's less controversial. I think anybody can objectively look at what's going on in the world, and particularly in America, and argue that it's not at a minimum turbulent. And I'm not trying to be political wherever you are on that spectrum. It's a turbulent time. And I think brands have a role to help shape what's going on, because business is in these days as powerful as politics. And I think that's a role that some brands are taking really, really seriously. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, I would propose that anything you do these days is political. If you say something from a certain perspective, it's political. If you don't say something, it's political, right? I think how do you pronounce it? The Berlinale, which is the big film festival, and Wim Wenders, who's the head of the film festival, said that. And I'm not casting any judgment or making any assessment, but he said something after a conversation about how filmmakers need to be less political, which prompted outrage from
yes, because
Arundhati Roy attacked him, and then I think there's a great conversation to be had. Is that, hey, whether it's art or whether it's business, or really life, I mean, there is a certain political statement that you are making, whether it's small, minuscule, or large, but anything you do.
Correct. And just going back to the Super Bowl example, I mean, the NFL, very powerful brand, never mind, organization and part of the cultural zeitgeist, the cultural DNA of this country. And really, I think sent a message about the kind of brand it is in terms of not necessarily the outright choice of the halftime performer, but the way it reacted in the face of criticism. And it said something about the values of the NFL. It said something about how they're not prepared to be guided by anything else but themselves in that sense. It said something about the kind of people that they're trying to attract and new consumers they're trying to attract into the franchise, all by making this probably what they thought was quite a subtle choice, right, of halftime performer. And, that's a brand acting according to its identity and its values. And then, as I already said, I also believe musicians in themselves are a brand. And obviously, Bad Bunny and Kid Rock both went out and through their choice of song, through where they decided and how they decided to show up, are sending a message about what they stand for. And I'm not here to say whether one is right or wrong. I'm just observing that it goes beyond the music today. It's beyond their product. If their product is their music, everything about how they delivered that musical performance is their brand.
I mean, I just want to say how consistent you are, because earlier we talked about positioning, character, and mission, and that is exactly what we just talked about just now. It's like,
Right.
what is your mission in the world? Who are you, as a character, or what's your personality, and where are you positioning yourself in the world? So I think that was a unintentional but amazing example of that
Thank you.
whole thing. Yeah. What do you do for fun, Daniel?
Well, being here in Colorado, I ski. When there's snow, we've had the most unusual weather here. It has been the lowest snowfall in December, January, February on record. It's currently 60 something degrees here in Colorado, which is crazy. But I will be heading to New York tomorrow, so don't worry. I'll be given all the snow and cold I need there. I love cooking, actually. I'm a big host. I'm always cooking at home. I'm always having people over. I love going to the theater. I'm actually off to Broadway on Thursday to see Ragtime, which has come back to the Lincoln Center. I think it should be I mean, it got rave reviews, and of course the subject matter. We wish the subject matter wasn't relevant for today's world. Unfortunately, it's very, very relevant for what's happening, in the world. So I think it's going to be a really amazing show. But yes, and this will shock a lot of people, particularly anyone watching this who knows me. But I've actually started to get a bit into football, into NFL.
Oh, wow.
Now it's also because the Broncos really did a run at it. We have our wonderful quarterback, Bo Nix, who's quite a character. But I've never really latched onto a football team. And having lived here now for 3.5 years, and the stadium is just over the road there, and just the excitement of it, and getting behind a kind of underdog team that's actually doing quite well. I can't believe it, but I'm quite into watching, football when the Broncos are playing. So
That's fun. That's fun. And also, you are known to make a mean cocktail.
love making a cocktail. I think there's a bit of if you go to the Filmland Spirits Instagram page, there's me making. What did I make? Was it a Manhattan?
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think I need to do more of that. I mean, it's funny. During COVID, I'm part of one of these marketing, associations. And we, of course, we were not able to meet in person, and so they were looking for people to show up to some of the online seminars and things like that, and try and bring a bit of lightheartedness to what was quite a difficult time. And so I offered to do a cocktail making segment. So there are about 300 marketeers, and I'll never forget. I propped my iPad up in my kitchen cabinet, so it was kind of at eye level with me. And then I put my phone on a little stand and pointed it at my hands, and where the chopping board was and the cocktail. So I called, the one at eye level had my name on it, and then I called the camera pointing toward my hand, the cocktail cam, and then I made, I think, 2 or 3 cocktails, and that was a lot of fun. So I should do more of that. My own point about creating some content.
Absolutely. Well, Danielle, thank you so much for your charm and for your content today and the substance with which you approach things, and giving me your time. I really appreciate it. What a wonderful conversation, everyone, with Danielle Clarke. And now, Danielle, just before I forget, if people are looking for you, they can find you on LinkedIn.
Correct. Daniel R., which stands for Robin. So Daniel R. Clarke. But also, if you go to www.t-at4.com, and I think we'll be able to put that on the screen.
Yes.
That's my website, and you can easily get in contact with me there. And let me just say thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. What a great conversation.
What a great conversation. And everyone, just to remind you, Daniel has been there and done it. Big firms, he's helping small brands. And I'm so thankful to have had you here today, Daniel. Thank you for all that you do to make the world a better place.
Thank you, Duncan.
And
Thank you very much.
thank you to Firebelly for supporting this. This is an opportunity for me to chat with people that are making the world better in food and beverage, and it's the best part of my day. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for listening to the Firebelly Social Show. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.